Hello, so this is the second hour of thermodynamics. Hope you have seen the first hour before you came here. If you haven't, go and see, then only you will be able to correlate better. In this hour, we will talk about polytropic processes, cyclic processes, efficiency, and heat engine. Heat engine is a super duper important topic when it comes to NEET question comes from here every single year. So stay tuned till the end and you will be able to remember them. That's a promise. So without wasting time, let's start first with the polytropic process. What is a polytropic process? A process that can be written in the format PV raised to power of x equals to constant is called polytropic process. In the last hour, we have learned about four processes: isochoric, isobaric, adiabatic, and isothermal. You can study all of them if you know just about polytropic process. Now, just by changing the value of x, you can derive all processes from the polytropic process. Let's see how. If let's say I have got PV raised to power of x equals to constant, I can convert this into isobaric process. How? For isobaric process, I know that pressure has to be constant. So if I take x equals to 0, what I get is PV raised to power of 0 equals to constant, and that gives you pressure equals to constant. So for isobaric process, you just have to substitute x equals to 0 and the polytropic equation becomes the equation of isobaric process. For isothermal process, we know that in the case of isothermal process, the temperature is constant. So we can say that the multiplication of pressure and volume is constant. So if you substitute x as 1, this equation becomes PV raised to power of 1 equals to constant, which is PV equals to constant, which is nothing but the condition for isothermal process. What has to be the value of x for adiabatic process? For adiabatic process, we know that the equation of stated PV raised to power of gamma equals to constant. So if you take the polytropic coefficient x as gamma, you get PV raised to power of gamma equals to constant, and that is the equation for adiabatic process. But sir, what to do for isochoric? You can rewrite this equation as P raised to power of 1 by x into V equals to constant raised to power of 1 by x. If you want isochoric process, which is V equals to constant, you want this P raised to power of 1 by x to become 1. And for P raised to power of 1 by x to become 1 by x should be equals to 0 or x has to be equal to infinity. So if you take x as infinity, this equation turns into the process of isochoric process. So by having different value of x, we can get different processes from the polytropic process. For isochoric process, substitute x as infinity. For isobaric process, substitute x as 0. You get P equals to constant. For isothermal process, substitute x equals to 1. You get isothermal process as PV becomes constant. And for adiabatic process, you should substitute x equals to gamma. Such an easy thing. Now what you have to remember are the following things for a polytropic process. So let's start with the first one. What is the work done in a polytropic process? Since the process equation looks exactly like that of adiabatic, it's just that in place of gamma we have got x. It is easy to remember the work done. The work done in an adiabatic process is how much? nr delta T upon 1 minus gamma. That can also be written as delta PV, means P final V final minus P initial V initial upon 1 minus gamma. Here beta in place of gamma, just remember x. So the work done is nothing but nr delta T upon 1 minus x. That can also be written as delta PV upon 1 minus x. So this is the work done in a polytropic process. Now, the heat given in a polytropic process will be how much? So heat given has to be equals to change in internal energy plus the work done. The change in internal energy for any goddammit process can be written as F by 2 and R delta T. And the work done we know for polytropic process can be written as nR delta T upon 1 minus x. So the heat given can be written as F by 2 nR delta T plus the work done, which is nR delta T upon 1 minus x. So you can take nR delta T common, or the heat given can be written as nR delta T times F by 2 plus 1 upon 1 minus x. So this is how you can write the heat given for a polytropic process. Now you know how to write the work done for polytropic, how to write the change in internal energy for any process. You write the change in internal energy as F by 2 nR delta T. And how to write the heat given. That will be nR delta T times F by 2 plus 1 upon 1 minus x. Now from here we can find out more things. Let's see. Writing this same equation in the differential format, I can write dq equals to nr dt into f by 2 plus 1 upon 1 minus x. I can rewrite this equation so as to compare with dq equals to nc dt. How? I will write dq equals to n times, bring this r inside, you get fr by 2 plus r upon 1 minus x into dt. Now dq equals to nc dt, right? dq equals to n something dt. dq equals to n something dt. So for a polytropic process, this quantity right here represents C, which is the molar specific heat. Hence, we can say the molar specific heat for a polytropic process is given by Fr by 2 plus R upon 1 minus x. Fr by 2 plus R upon 1 minus x. So if for any process, let's say the polytropic coefficient is 2, what will be the molar specific heat? So you will say F into R by 2 plus R upon 1 minus 2. But sir, how to find this polytropic coefficient? Let's see that. So for the following condition, find the polytropic coefficient. They will give you different type of equation and you will have to find polytropic coefficient in each case. So let's practice this. Let's say they give you, if pressure is proportional to temperature, what is the polytropic coefficient for this particular equation? So you'll say, okay, they have given me pressure proportional to temperature. I need to find what is the polytropic coefficient. To find the polytropic coefficient, I have to write this equation in the format PV raised to the power of x equals to constant. Yes. So our mission is to find the polytropic coefficient. What to do? We can say we need to write the equation in terms of pressure and volume. So we need to eliminate temperature, right? So P equals to KT, some constant into T. Now, in place of T, you can write PV by NR. Sir, how? PV equals to nRT. So, T has to be equals to PV by NR. Now, once you have written, what you get from here is that P equals to K into PV by NR. On both the side, you can see P will get cancelled. Okay. So, you will get V equals to NR by K. So, V equals to constant. Now V equals to constant is the condition for which process? This is for isochoric process. And what is the polytropic coefficient for an isochoric process? So for an isochoric process, the polytropic coefficient comes out to be infinity. Since we have got V equals to constant, we will say for P proportional to T, the polytropic coefficient has to be infinity. Let's see more example to understand better. The next example. If they give you, if P square V cube equals to constant, then tell me what is the polytropic coefficient. So as to find polytropic coefficient, we need to have equation in the format PV raised to the power of x equals to constant. But here they have given me P square V cube equals to constant. So what to do? Take under root both the sides. You will say P square V cube raised to the power of 1 by 2 equals to constant raised to the power of 1 by 2. Now P square V cube raised to the power of 1 by 2 will be P square into half multiplied by V cube into half equals to constant raised to half, which will be another constant. So you will get PV raised to the power of 3 by 2. This 2 to get cancelled. So PV raised to the power of 3 by 2 equals to constant. If you have got PV raised to the power of 3 by 2 equals to constant, it means that the polytropic coefficient is 3 by 2. So the polytropic coefficient will be 3 by 2. Let's practice more to understand better. The next example, if they give you P square V by T equals to constant. Now tell me what is the polytropic coefficient. So you have to bring this equation in the format PV raised to the power of x equals to constant. Yes. First thing, we need to eliminate temperature. So what to do? In place of temperature, from PV equals to nRT, substitute temperature equals to PV by nR. Once you substitute this, what you will get is P square V. In place of T, substitute PV by NR. So you will get P square V by PV upon NR. So the NR goes up. So here you get P square V by PV into NR equals to constant. Now 1V and 1V will get cancelled. 1P and 1P will get cancelled. So what you get is P into NR equals to constant, which means that P is constant. If I tell you that P is constant, tell me what is the polytropic coefficient. So sir, polytropic equation is given by PV raised to the power of x equals to constant. For P equals to constant, x has to be 0. then only the polytropic equation PV raised to the power of x equals to constant gives you P equals to constant. Hence, the value of x in this condition has to be 0. The next example, if they give you PV square into T is constant. Now tell me what is the polytropic coefficient. Again the same drill. To find the polytropic coefficient, you need to write this equation in the format PV raised to the power of x equals to constant. So in place of temperature, write PV by NR. So you'll get PV square into PV by NR equals to constant. Now bachcho, this NR goes to the right hand side and constant multiplied by constant becomes a new constant. And on the left hand side, you will get P into P square, V square into V cube. So you'll get P square into V cube equals to a new constant. Your mission is to find the polytropic coefficient. So root both the sides. Once you take root on both the sides, what you get is PV raised to the power of 3 by 2 equals to constant. Hence, the polytropic coefficient has to be equals to 3 by 2. Hence, we get x equals to 3 by 2. Now, once you know the polytropic coefficient, you can easily find what is the molar specific heat. You can easily find what is the work done. You can easily find what is the heat given in the process. So, without wasting time, let's continue. So now we will talk about the slope of PV graph for a polytropic process. We know that the equation of polytropic process is given by PV raised to the power of x equals to constant, and the slope of PV graph is given by dP by dV. So as to get dP by dV from here, we need to differentiate both the sides. When we differentiate both the sides, we say differentiation of PV raised to the power of x equals to differentiation of constant. And we all know what is the differentiation of constant, 0. But on the left hand side, we need to differentiate multiplication of P and V raised to the power of x. How to do? It will be differentiation of first term multiplied by second term as it is, plus differentiation of second term, which is V raised to the power of x. Now the differentiation of V raised to the power of x will be x V raised to the power of x minus 1 into dV multiplied by first term P as it is, and this equals to 0. Now our mission is to find dP by dV. So first of all, on differentiating, you will get dP into V raised to the power of x plus x V raised to the power of x minus 1 dV into the first term as it is, P equals to 0. If we need to find dP by dV, take this whole term to the right hand side. So you get dP into V raised to the power of x equals to minus x V raised to the power of x minus 1 into dV into P. Now, on the left hand side, we have got V raised to the power of x. On the right hand side, V raised to the power of x minus 1. If you cancel out by V raised to the power of x minus 1, on the left hand side, you are left with V. So from here, you get better dP by dV equals to minus xP by V. So dP by dV comes out to be minus xP by V. What is x? The polytropic coefficient. For an isochoric process, we know that this polytropic coefficient is infinite. So the slope of the PV graph is minus infinity into P by V, which is infinity. Infinity means a straight line parallel to the y-axis. So for isochoric process, the slope comes out to be infinity. For an isobaric process, the polytropic coefficient is 0. So dP by dV is 0 into P by V, which is 0. Hence you get a line parallel to the x-axis. So isobaric process, the slope is 0. For an isothermal process, the polytropic coefficient is 1. So the slope dP by dV comes out to be minus 1 into P by V, which is minus P by V. And for an adiabatic process, the polytropic coefficient is gamma. So the slope comes out to be equals to minus gamma P by V. Notice that for both isothermal process as well as adiabatic process, we got negative slope. So if you will think of the PV graph, and if you draw a tangent at any point on the PV graph, you must get negative slope. Moreover, the magnitude of slope for adiabatic process is gamma times that for isothermal. Remember that gamma is a number greater than 1. For monoatomic, we get 5 by 3, 1.66. For diatomic, we get 7 by 5, 1.4. For polyatomic non-linear, we get 4 by 3, which is 1.33. So the slope for adiabatic process is negative and is gamma time that for isothermal. So more steeper graph. Now, once we have talked about slope of PV graph, now let's talk about another thing which is called bulk modulus. Bulk modulus is given as minus dP upon dV by V. From here, if you bring the V upwards, you can write V into dP by dV equals to minus xp. Bring the minus sign also to the left hand side. So you get minus V dP by dV equals to xp. If you move this V from numerator to the denominator of denominator, you get minus dP upon dV by V equals to xp. The term written here on the left hand side, minus dP upon dV by V, is the bulk modulus. So the bulk modulus of a gas following polytropic process PV raised to power of x equals to constant is given by xp. You need to remember these two results. First, the slope of the graph of polytropic process is minus xp by v, and the bulk modulus is xp. You can remember this from Windows XP. So the bulk modulus is xp. Now moving on. What will be the bulk modulus for an isochoric process? For an isochoric process, the polytropic coefficient is infinity. So for isochoric process, the bulk modulus comes out to be infinity times pressure, which is infinity. For an isobaric process, the polytropic coefficient is 0. So the bulk modulus comes out to be 0 times pressure, which is 0. And for isothermal process, polytropic coefficient is 1. So the bulk modulus is 1 times P, which is nothing but the pressure. And for the last one, adiabatic process, the polytropic coefficient is gamma. So we get the bulk modulus to be gamma P. Okay, so you need to remember this. We will use this somewhere in sound. Moving on. How does the graph look like for different processes? Let's say we are talking about expansion. So the slope of the graph is given by minus x P by V. If we talk about expansion of gas, from initial certain state to final certain volume. If the process is isobaric expansion, then for isobaric expansion, the polytropic coefficient is 0 and hence the slope of the graph is 0. And isn't this obvious that pressure has to be constant, so the slope of the graph will be 0, aligned parallel to the x-axis. Now for isothermal process, from same initial state to same final volume. For isothermal process, on the PV graph, we get a curve. And for adiabatic process, remember that the slope is gamma times that for isothermal. For isothermal, we get x equals to 1. And for adiabatic, x is gamma. So the slope for adiabatic curve will be more steeper. And it will be a curve, but it will be more steeper. So from same initial state to same final volume, we have seen what does the three graph look like. This is for expansion of gas. If we talk about compression of gas, let's say we have got from the same initial state compression of gas to certain particular volume. So for isobaric compression, the slope has to be 0. So we will get a straight line parallel to the x-axis. For isothermal compression, we will get a curve. As the volume decreases, the pressure increases in isothermal process. And for adiabatic process, we will get an even steeper curve because it has gamma times the slope. So this will be the adiabatic compression curve. Now, we need to understand whose work done will have more magnitude from the same initial state to the same final volume. For isobaric process, we will say the work done will be area under the PV graph in the case of isobaric. For isothermal process, we will say the work done will be area under the PV graph under the isothermal curve. And for adiabatic process, we will say the area will be under the adiabatic curve on the PV diagram. As you can see, the area under the isobaric is highest, then comes the area under the isothermal, then comes the area under the adiabatic. So work done in isobaric expansion from same initial state to same final volume will be highest. So if the gas expands from same initial state to same final volume, then the work done in isobaric process is more than the work done in isothermal process, and that is more than the work done in adiabatic process. As the gas expands, the work done in all three cases will be positive. What about compression? In the case of compression, the sign of the work done will be negative. So here we are comparing the magnitude. For the adiabatic compression, you can see the area under graph will be highest. Then comes the area under the isothermal, and then comes the area under the isobaric if we are talking about the magnitude. So if the gas is compressed from same initial state to same final volume, then the magnitude of work done in adiabatic process is more than the magnitude of work done in an isothermal process is more than the magnitude of work done in isobaric process. This is something important that you should remember. Now let's move on ahead. A question: if a gas is expanded from certain volume isothermally and then brought back to the same initial volume adiabatically, so expanded isothermally and then compressed back to the same initial volume adiabatically, determine the sign of the overall work done by the gas. Let's say we have this PV curve. If we visualize the isothermal expansion of gas first, so let's say the gas goes from a state A to a state B, and this is isothermal expansion. Now the gas comes back to the same initial volume but undergoing an adiabatic compression. For adiabatic curve, we will get steeper curve, more slow. So this will be the adiabatic compression, and the gas finally reaches the state C. Visualize the pressure and volume for these three states: initial state, intermediate state, and the final state. The final volume is same as the initial volume, V1. The intermediate volume, let's say V2. Let's say initial pressure is P1, intermediate pressure P2, and the final pressure P3. From the graph itself, you can see that the final pressure is more than the initial pressure. So the final temperature also have to be more than the initial temperature. Why? Because for same volume, if the pressure finally is higher, the temperature finally also have to be higher. But this is not at all asked from us in the question. What they are asking me is determine the sign of the work done by the gas in the overall process. So when the gas expands, you get some positive work. When the gas compresses, you get some negative work. Now, question is, which one has got greater magnitude? So you can say the negative work has got more area under the curve, so it will have more magnitude. Hence, the net work done will be positive but less positive, and negative more negative, so the overall work done will have negative sign. So as the magnitude of negative work is more than that of positive work, as the magnitude of negative work is more than that of positive work, the net work done is negative. Okay. Also, the final pressure and the final temperature is greater than initial. This is distinctly visible from the graph that the final pressure is more than the initial pressure. Okay. So now let's talk about cyclic processes. What are cyclic processes? Sir, the type of processes in which on completion of one cycle you are back to the same place. Such processes form a closed loop on the PV curve. So cyclic process is when the final state is same as the initial state on completion of one cycle. To understand cyclic processes, let's think of a cyclic process on a PV graph. Let's say a gas is taken through three states A, B and C. First from state A to B, then from state B to C, and then from state C to A. So at the end of the cycle, the gas is again at the same state A from where it started. If somebody asks you what is the work done by the gas in this complete cyclic process, so you will say, let's break it down step by step. From state A to state B, the work done will be equal to area under the PV graph, this area. From B to C, it's an isochoric process. The volume is constant, so the work done is 0. And from C to A, it's an isobaric compression. In this isobaric compression, the work done will be negative. So what will be the net work done? So you will say this whole area under AB minus the area under the BC. So how much area do you exactly get? We get the area of the triangle. Area of the triangle. So the area enclosed in the cyclic process gives us the net work done. Now, if somebody asks you what is the sign of this net work done, you will say during the expansion from state A to state B, the work done is positive as the volume increases. During the process B to C, no work done, it's isochoric process. During the process C to A, there is a negative work done equal to the area of this rectangle. Okay. So the net work done during the entire cyclic process has to be positive. So for complete cycle, you will say that the work done is positive in this case. Now, what can we say about internal energy? So we can say since you start from the state A and come back to the same state on completion of cycle, and we know that internal energy is a state function. So the final temperature on reaching A is same as the initial temperature at A. So for the complete cycle, the change in internal energy is 0. Now what can you say for the heat given? From the first law, we know that heat given equals to change in internal energy plus the work done. For the complete cycle, this particular cycle, we have found that the change in internal energy is 0 and the work done is positive. If the work done is positive and the change in internal energy is 0, then for the entire cycle, you can say that the heat given also has to be positive. So remember that for the entire cycle, the net heat given in the entire cycle equals to the net work done by the gas in the entire cycle, and for this particular case that will be positive. What if rather than having a clockwise cycle on the PV graph, this is clockwise cycle, if we have an anti-clockwise cycle on the PV graph, then you can say going from state A to state B, this is isochoric part, work done is 0. Going from state B to state C, the gas expands. So the work done is positive, equal to the area under the BC part. Now going from C to A, we can see that the gas compresses, the volume decreases. So the work done will be negative, equal to this whole negative area. So what will be the net work done? So from B to C, we get positive work done, but that has got less magnitude. From C to A, we have got negative work done, which have got more magnitude. So the overall work done in the complete cycle is going to be negative. So you just need to remember, if you get clockwise cycle on the PV curve, y-axis P, x-axis V, then the work done is positive. And if on the PV curve you get an anti-clockwise process, then the work done by the gas comes out to be negative. Again, the change in internal energy over the entire cycle will be 0. If you apply first law of thermodynamics for the entire cycle, you can say the heat given equals to change in internal energy plus work done. For the entire cycle, the change in internal energy is 0. For this entire cycle, the work done is negative. Hence, the net heat given equals to work done, and that will be negative for this case. One important point that has to be remembered: the work done in the entire cycle equals to area enclosed in the cycle. Here I took the case of triangle. It works even for circle, rectangle and all the cases. So the net work done is equals to the area enclosed in the cycle. But do remember, it should be PV graph. You can't take area of the TV graph or PT graph. It has to be PV graph. So as to remember this thing, under which case the work done by the gas is positive and in which case negative, let's practice this question. Determine the sign of work done by the gas in each case. So the first case, you have got PV graph, and on the PV graph you have got a clockwise cyclic process. So sir, we have just learned, when you have got PV graph on the y-axis P, on the x-axis V, and we have got a cyclic process clockwise, then the work done comes out to be positive. So in this case the work done is positive, and I tell you, you just need to remember this case. And when you remember that you are remembering it for physics. So for chemistry, if you see a clockwise process on the PV graph, then the work done is negative. Okay, so just remember one thing, and using that you can answer it every time. Now, if they flip the axis, rather than giving PV, they give you VP graph. And on the VP graph, they have given you a clockwise process. Now you will say, sir, you have flipped the axis, but the process is still clockwise. So this time the sign of the work will flip. So the work done in this case will be negative, as you have flipped the axis. Similarly, keeping the axis same, still PV. But let's say the cyclic process is anti-clockwise. Then what will be the sign of the work done by the gas? Y-axis P, x-axis V, and the process is anti-clockwise. So the work done has to be negative. Just remember the first one, on PV graph clockwise, positive. And the last case, if on the VP graph they give you an anti-clockwise cyclic process. So sir, you have flipped two things. First, the graph is not clockwise. The graph is now anti-clockwise, and the axis also have been flipped. That's why two negative make a positive. In this case, you get work done equals to positive. So moving on. For the cyclic process shown on the TV graph, determine the sign of the work done. For the cyclic process shown on the TV graph, determine the sign of the work done. So first of all, here they have shown me a cyclic process on the TV graph. Now what will be the sign of work done? So bachcho, see, first of all, convert this TV graph into PV graph. How? You have to break down the process step by step. So going from A to B, this is which type of process? Sir, A to B, temperature is constant and the volume is increasing. This is isothermal expansion. So from A to B, the process is isothermal expansion. Temperature is constant, volume is increasing. From B to C, the volume is constant and the temperature decreases. So from PV equals to nRT, volume is constant, temperature decreases, so the pressure should also decrease. So this is an isochoric process, constant volume process in which the temperature and the pressure decreases. From C to D, which type of process? You can again see from C to D, temperature is constant, but the volume is decreasing, so it is isothermal compression. And from D to A, again an isochoric process. D to A, volume is constant. Volume is constant, but temperature is increasing. So from PV equals to nRT, volume is constant, N is constant, R is constant, temperature is increasing, so the pressure should increase. So if you think of this graph on PV, then what does the graph looks like? So first step is isothermal expansion. Then an isochoric process in which the pressure decreases, isochoric process in which the pressure decreases, then isothermal compression, then an isochoric process in which the pressure is increasing. So this is somehow the graph looks. So A to B, you have got isothermal expansion, B to C, isochoric process in which pressure decreases, C to D, isothermal compression, D to A, isochoric process in which the pressure increases. So question is, what will be the sign of work done? So on the PV graph, you are getting a clockwise process. If you get a clockwise process on the PV graph, then the work done has to be positive. So we will say, as we get clockwise process on the PV graph, hence the cycle on PV graph, the work done by gas has to be positive. Keep this in mind. Okay. Next example. Efficiency of a cycle. Now, here be careful, question comes from here every year. So how do we define efficiency of a cycle? We say that efficiency of a cycle represented by symbol neta equals to work done upon heat given. Now what is the meaning of heat given? Heat given here is not the net heat given in the cyclic process. Heat given is just whatever amount of heat has been given to the gas. So what is the difference between them? You will understand, just keep focusing. Just remember that here when I say heat given, it is just the heat given. So efficiency equals to work done upon heat given. When we say heat given, we consider only the heat provided in the cyclic process, not the heat rejected by the gas, not the net heat. The net heat will be heat given minus heat extracted. Sir, I am not getting the meaning of this net heat given and heat given. Let's understand this with an example. Just remember that efficiency equals to work done upon heat given. You just have to consider the amount of heat given to the gas. So, an example to understand efficiency. Determine the efficiency of the cyclic process for monoatomic gas. When I say monoatomic gas, the degree of freedom is 3. So on the PV graph, let's say we have got this cyclic process. The gas goes from state A to B, then B to C, then C to A, and the pressure and volume are mentioned. At A, the pressure is P0, volume V0. At B, pressure is 2P0, volume 2V0. And at C, pressure is P0 and volume 2V0. Our mission is to find efficiency of this cyclic process. Remember that for a cyclic process, efficiency is work done upon heat given. Work done upon heat given. And when we say heat given, we just have to consider the amount of heat given, not the amount of heat rejected. So what is the meaning of it? Now listen carefully. Here you will understand the meaning of heat given. Look at each part of this cycle. From A to B, you have to give heat or the system reject heat. Sir, heat given equals to change in internal energy plus work done. Yes, sir. Going from A to B, the pressure increases, the volume increases. So both pressure and volume are increasing. So from PV equals to nRT, if pressure increases, volume increases, temperature must increase. If the temperature increases, it means that internal energy increases. If the internal energy increases, I can say that the change in internal energy is positive. Okay. Now from A to B, the work done will be area under the graph. Moreover, from A to B, I know that the volume of the gas increases from V to 2V. This means that the gas is expanding. When the gas is expanding, the work done is positive. So from A to B, internal energy increases. So change in internal energy is positive. Work done is positive. So Q has to be positive. When Q is positive, it means that heat is being given to the system. So from A to B, some amount of heat Q1, let's say, is given to the system. From B to C, the system will reject heat or system will absorb heat, let's see. From B to C, we know that it's an isochoric process. The volume is constant 2V0. So the work done has to be 0. Now from B to C, we can see that the volume is constant but the pressure is decreasing. So from PV equals to nRT, volume is constant but the pressure is decreasing. So the temperature must be decreasing. So for on going from B to C, we can say that the change in internal energy is negative. Why? The temperature decreases, internal energy decreases, the change in internal energy has to be negative. So from Q equals to delta U plus W. For the process from B to C, work done is 0, yes. The change in internal energy is negative, yes. So the heat given is negative. When I say that heat given is negative, it means that you have not given heat, the system has rejected heat. So let's say in this part, system rejects a heat Q2. Now let's focus on the last part, that is from C to A. From C to A, what happens to the heat given? So heat given equals to change in internal energy plus work done. From C to A, the pressure is constant but the volume decreasing. So from PV equals to nRT, pressure is constant, volume decreases, so the temperature decreases, so the internal energy decreases, so the change in internal energy has to be negative. And from C to A, the gas compresses. So the work done by the gas also have to be negative. As delta U is negative, W is negative, so the heat given also have to be negative. If the heat given is negative, it means that the gas rejects heat. So when the gas rejects heat, let's say in this part, it rejects some heat Q3. If I ask you what is the net heat given to gas, so you'll say the net heat given to gas is heat given Q1 minus the heat rejected by the gas, which is Q2 plus Q3. So this is the net heat given. When I ask you what is the heat given to gas, that is only Q1 because Q2 and Q3 are rejected by the gas. So better understand that when we say efficiency equals to work done upon heat given, in heat given, we do not write the net heat given. No, we write only the heat given. So efficiency equals to work done upon heat given. So that will be equals to W, the net work done upon heat given Q1. Now Q1 can be written as the change in internal energy during the process A to B plus the work done by the gas. So how to write the change in internal energy? Change in internal energy can be written as F by 2 and R delta T, or can be written as F by 2 delta PV. Now here you know that since the gas is monoatomic, the degree of freedom will be 3. What is delta PV? P final V final minus P initial V initial. So you can find delta U using F by 2 delta PV. How to find the work done? If you need to find the work done from A to B, simply find the area under the graph. So you can say the heat given equals to 3 by 2 delta PV plus the work done. Now delta PV will be P final V final at B 2P0 into 2V0 minus P0 V0. And the work done will be area under the graph, that will be half into sum of parallel side P0 plus 2P0 multiplied by the gap between them, which is V0, the area of this trapezium. So you'll get Q1 equals to 3 by 2 times P final V final 4P0 V0, 2P0 into 2V0 minus P0 V0 plus half into the sum of parallel side P0 plus 2P0, 3P0 multiplied by the gap between them, which is V0. So here you get 3 times of 3P0 V0, which is 9P0 V0 by 2 plus 3P0 V0 by 2. So you get the heat given equals to 9P0 V0 by 2 plus 3P0 V0 by 2, which is 12P0 V0 by 2, which is 6P0 V0. This is the heat given. Okay. Efficiency is work done upon heat given. So how to find work done? Work done will be nothing but the area enclosed by this cyclic process. Since on the PV graph, this is a clockwise cyclic process, the work done has to be positive. And the area of this triangle is easy to find. Half into base into height. So you will say efficiency equals to work done upon heat given. That will be area enclosed half into P naught into V naught upon the heat given 6 P naught V naught. So if you cancel out bachcho P naught V naught P naught V naught, efficiency comes out to be 1 by 2 divided by 6, which is nothing but 1 by 12. So the efficiency of this cyclic process is 1 by 12. Let's understand efficiency more with the next example. Question is, for the diatomic gas, the cyclic process is shown. Determine the efficiency of this particular cyclic process. So gas goes from state A to state B to state C to state D, and back from D to A. You need to find the efficiency. To find efficiency, we need to find two things. First, the work done. Second, the heat given. Now, from A to B, we will have to give heat or the system rejects heat. A to B is an isochoric process. Work done 0. But since at constant volume pressure increases, temperature increases, internal energy increases, so the change in internal energy is positive. So from A to B, change in internal energy is positive, work done is 0. So heat, which is delta U plus W, has to be positive, hence heat must be given. From B to C, pressure is constant, volume increases, it means that the work done is positive. So from Q equals to delta U plus W, you can say from B to C, work done is positive, as well as at constant pressure, the volume increases, it means that temperature increases, so the change in internal energy also have to be positive. So from B to C, the heat given is positive, so some heat will be given in this part as well. In the part C to D, it's an isochoric process in which the internal energy is decreasing, so delta U will be negative. So as delta U will be negative, the heat given will be negative. So in this part, some heat will be rejected. And D to A is an isobaric compression. In an isobaric compression, heat will be again rejected. So efficiency will be nothing but the area enclosed by the graph upon the heat given. And heat given will be Q1 plus Q2. So let's start. Now, here some heat given Q1. In BC, heat given Q2, in process CD, some heat rejected Q3, in process DA, some heat rejected Q4. We will say that Q1 will be equal to how much? Sir, to find Q1 now, you need to find the heat given from A to B. Now the heat given equals to change in internal energy plus work done. As A to B is isochoric process, work done is 0. So the heat given has to be equals to change in internal energy. That will be equals to 5 by 2 F by 2 into delta PV, P final V final minus P initial V initial. At B, the pressure is 2 P naught, volume V naught. At A, the pressure is P naught, volume V naught. So delta PV will be 2 P naught V naught minus P naught V naught, and the degree of freedom has been taken as 5 because they have told me this is a diatomic gas. So this is the heat given in the first part. Now this equals to 5 P naught V naught. Now what will be the heat given in the second part? In the second part, we have got a process which is isobaric expansion. The heat given will be equals to change in internal energy plus work done. How to write change in internal energy from B to C? Sir, very simple. F by 2 delta PV. So change in internal energy will be written as F by 2 delta PV. At C, the pressure is 2 P naught, volume 2 V naught. So P final V final 2 P naught into 2 V naught. Minus at B, pressure is 2 P naught, volume is V naught. So what you get is delta PV equals to 4 P naught V naught minus 2 P naught V naught. That comes out to be 2 P naught V naught. And that is written here. F by 2 into delta PV. Plus the work done. From B to C, you have got isobaric expansion. In isobaric expansion, the work done is pressure times change in volume, or simply the area under the process BC, and that will be nothing but 2 P naught, the height, into V naught. So the work done will be 2 P naught V naught. When you add them up, you get here 5 P naught V naught plus 2 P naught V naught. That comes out to be 7 P naught V naught. The efficiency of the cycle has to be work done upon the heat given. Work done will be nothing but the area enclosed by the cycle. The height is 2 P naught minus P naught, which is P naught. and the base length of this rectangle is 2V0 minus V0, which is V0. So the work done is nothing but area upon Q1 plus Q2, which is the heat given. So efficiency can be written as P0 V0 upon 5 P0 V0 by 2 Q1 plus 7 P0 V0. Now here you can take 5 P0 V0 by 2 plus 7 P0 V0 as P0 V0 upon 5 P0 V0 whole by 2 plus 7 into 2, 14 P0 V0. So this 2 moves from denominator of denominator to numerator. So you get 2 P0 V0 upon 5 plus 14, that is 19 P0 V0. Cancelling out bacho P0 V0, you get 2 by 19. So the efficiency comes out to be 2 by 19. Okay, let's talk ahead. So now talking about the most important part, the heat engine. Every year the question comes from here, either from heat engine or from refrigerator. So listen to this particular part carefully. What is an engine? Sir, engine is a device which converts heat into work. So the engine absorbs heat from a source which is at higher temperature, let's say Q1, and discards some part of this heat energy to a sink at lower temperature, let's say Q2. And while doing this heat exchange, it converts some part of the heat into work, and let's say it gives a work output W. Here remember that the source and the sink are assumed to be of infinitely large heat capacity. This means that even after providing some heat to the engine, the temperature of source do not decrease, and even after accepting some heat from the heat engine, the temperature of the sink do not increase. So the source and the sink have infinitely large heat capacity. Now, what will be the efficiency of the engine? Just the way we have learned, efficiency is work done upon heat given. So here also efficiency of the heat engine is nothing but the work done by the engine upon the heat given to the engine. So W by Q1. What is Q1? The heat provided to the engine by a source at higher temperature. What is Q2? The heat rejected by the engine to a sink at lower temperature. From the principle of conservation of energy, we can say that the heat given to the engine, the energy given to the engine is equal to the energy discarded by the system by the engine plus the work done by the engine. So from here we can say Q1 equals to Q2 plus W. The heat provided to the engine equals to heat discarded by the engine plus the work done by the engine. From here we can write work done by the engine to be equals to Q1 minus Q2. Work done by the engine equals to Q1 minus Q2, and substitute it in place of work here. So you will say efficiency of the heat engine equals to Q1 minus Q2 by Q1. And you can write this Q1 minus Q2 by Q1 as 1 minus Q2 by Q1. So remember that the efficiency of a heat engine is 1 minus the heat rejected to the sink upon heat accepted from the source. Is it so obvious that this quantity Q2 by Q1 should be less than 1? If Q2 by Q1 has to be less than 1, it means that the numerator has to be smaller than the denominator. So what is the numerator? The heat rejected to the sink, which will always be less than the heat accepted from the source. So just remember this quantity Q2 by Q1 should be less than 1. Hence we write Q2 by Q1, heat rejected to the sink upon heat accepted from the source. Now we will talk about the most awesome theorem called Carnot's theorem. So what is Carnot theorem? Carnot theorem says that working between a given temperature of source and sink. Once more, working between a given temperature of source and sink, no heat engine can have efficiency greater than Carnot heat engine. So Carnot gave a heat engine, and then he gave a theorem stating that no heat engine can have a higher efficiency than Carnot heat engine. It's like me saying no one can teach physics better than me. Jokes apart. So what does the Carnot theorem tells us? Working between a given temperature of source and sink, no heat engine can have efficiency greater than Carnot heat engine. Now what the hell is Carnot heat engine? Carnot heat engine is a 4-step heat engine. The 4 steps are: the first step, going from A to B, it's isothermal expansion. So first the gas undergoes isothermal expansion. Then from B to C, the gas undergoes adiabatic expansion. So see, from A to B, the volume increases. From B to C, again volume increases, but the second curve, the adiabatic curve, is more steeper compared to the isothermal because the slope of adiabatic curve is gamma times that of isothermal, right? So A to B, isothermal expansion, B to C is adiabatic expansion. Now from C to D, this is isothermal compression, and then the last step, which is from D to A, we have got adiabatic compression. So there are 4 steps in the Carnot engine: isothermal expansion, adiabatic expansion, isothermal compression, adiabatic compression. These are the 4 steps. Now for a Carnot engine, beta, during the adiabatic process, there is no heat exchange. During the isothermal expansion, the engine accepts heat, and during the isothermal compression, the engine discards heat. Okay, so during the isothermal expansion, the engine absorbs heat, and during the isothermal compression, the engine discards heat. Now, for the Carnot engine, we can say the heat accepted upon the temperature at which the heat is accepted equals to the heat rejected upon the temperature at which the heat is rejected. So Q1 by T1 equals to Q2 by T2. Hence from here we can say that Q1 by Q2 equals to T1 by T2, or flipping both the side, we can say Q2 by Q1 equals to T2 by T1. So the heat rejected to the sink upon the heat accepted from the source equals to the temperature of the sink upon temperature of the source. So the efficiency which we have just learned equals to 1 minus heat rejected to sink upon heat accepted from source can also be written as 1 minus T2 by T1, that is 1 minus temperature of sink upon temperature of source. And again I will say this is so obvious that this quantity has to be less than 1. So T2 lower temperature, T1 higher temperature, temperature of sink upon temperature of source. So this is the efficiency of the Carnot heat engine. For all heat engines, you can write efficiency equals to 1 minus Q2 by Q1, heat rejected to sink upon heat accepted from the source. But only for a Carnot heat engine, in place of Q2 by Q1, you can write T2 by T1. So let's see some questions to understand heat engine. The first question. The heat engine works between source and sink, temperature of 127 degrees centigrade and 27 degrees centigrade. So the source temperature is 127, sink temperature is 27. Again I am saying in the entire heat track, better take the temperature in Kelvin. They will always give you in degree centigrade. It's your job to convert it into Kelvin. Can the efficiency of this heat engine be 0.9? So what does Carnot theorem told us? It told us that for an engine working between same temperature of sink and source, the maximum efficiency will be for Carnot heat engine. If we assume that there is a Carnot heat engine working between 127 degrees centigrade and 27 degrees centigrade, let's find out what will be the efficiency of that Carnot heat engine. So for a fixed temperature of source and sink, a Carnot heat engine has maximum possible efficiency. Now, temperature of source is 273 plus 127, which is 400 Kelvin. Temperature of sink is 273 plus 27, that is 300 Kelvin. So we can say the efficiency for Carnot heat engine working between this particular source and sink temperature will be 1 minus 300 by 400. 300 by 400 is 3 by 4. So you get 1 minus 3 by 4, that is 0.25. If the efficiency is 0.25 for Carnot heat engine, can any engine have efficiency more than it? Can any engine have efficiency of 0.9? Not possible. It is not possible to have efficiency more than that of Carnot heat engine. Hence, the maximum possible efficiency working between given temperatures is 0.25. So the efficiency of 0.9 is not possible. Okay, let's see the next example. If both the source and sink temperature is increased by the same amount, if both the source and sink temperature is increased by the same amount, then the efficiency of Carnot engine will increase, decrease, remain same. Now many a time as soon as the students see this question, they're like, okay, efficiency equals to 1 minus temperature of sink upon the temperature of source. So if you increase them by same amount, the efficiency should remain same. No, that is not at all the case. So let's see what happened to the efficiency. So assume the temperature of both the source and the sink to be temperature of source and temperature of sink. The efficiency of the Carnot engine will be equals to 1 minus temperature of sink by temperature of source. As per the problem statement, both the temperatures are increased by the same amount. Let's say that temperature by which both of them are increased is T dash. So if assume that both the temperature are increased by an amount T dash, now the new efficiency will be equals to temperature of source nu minus temperature of sink nu upon temperature of source nu, or 1 minus temperature of sink nu by temperature of source nu. So you will say the new efficiency N dash will be equals to 1 minus the new temperature of sink, that is T sink plus T dash, upon the new temperature of source, that is T source plus T dash. Now you can make the denominator common as T source plus T dash. You will get efficiency equals to T source plus T dash minus T sink plus T dash upon T source plus T dash. In the numerator, when you open up the bracket, this plus T dash and minus T dash get cancelled. There is a minus sign here. So the numerator becomes T source minus T sink and the denominator is T source plus T dash. So beta, original efficiency was T source minus T sink upon T source. The new efficiency is T source minus T sink upon T source plus T dash. So numerator is same, but on increasing the temperature by T dash, in denominator here you get an extra term of T dash added. So in this case the denominator is larger. If for N dash the denominator is larger, it means that N dash has to be smaller. So you will say as the denominator increases, so we can say that the efficiency decreases. So if the temperature of both source and sink are increased by the same amount, then the efficiency of the heat engine decreases. Remember this point. Moving on. If on taking 100 joule of heat per second from source, a heat engine rejects 60 joule of heat to sink, find the efficiency. So 100 joule of heat taken per second from source and rejects 60 joule of heat to the sink, find the efficiency. So this is a simple question. So from source you have taken 100 joule and to the sink it has rejected 60 joule. How much will be the work done? Sir, out of 100, 60 has been rejected from the principle of conservation of energy. The work done has to be 40 joule. So efficiency equals to work done upon heat given. Now and Q1 has to be equals to Q2 plus W. Now Q1 is given to us as 100, Q2 is given to us as 60, so the work done comes out to be 40. So the efficiency of this heat engine has to be simply work done 40 upon the heat given, which is 100, and 40 by 100 is nothing but 0.4. So efficiency of this particular heat engine is 0.4. Sir, you could have directly used 1 minus heat rejected to sink upon heat taken from source, or you can have done 1 minus directly 60 by 100, and 60 by 100 is 0.6, so 1 minus 0.6 gives you 0.4. Same thing. Now I just want to explain a little bit more to revise again the relationship between them. Moving on. Now let's talk about something called refrigerator. What is the job of refrigerator? To keep things cool. How does the refrigerator keep things cool? If you have a refrigerator, it continuously keep on withdrawing heat from things which are already cold. If you take some water, put it inside freezer and shut it, what happens? Sir, it converts into ice, but it takes some time to convert that water into ice. Now, first the temperature of water decreases, then it reaches 0 degree centigrade, then ice starts to form. So what a refrigerator do is it constantly extract heat from something which is already cold, and as the heat is extracted it become even cooler, right? So the job of refrigerator is to extract heat from something which is already cold. The amount of heat extracted, I call it QC, and it rejects some heat to the surrounding. Let's say it's called QH. Now to do so, refrigerator doesn't work on its own. We have to connect it with a plug, right? So we have to supply energy, and let's say we have to do some work to get this process done. So a refrigerator is a device which extracts heat from colder object requires some work to be done to do this and then provides heat to the surrounding. The refrigerator rejects heat. That's why the back side of the refrigerator is hot, right? It rejects heat to the surrounding. Now we say that from principle of conservation of energy, the heat extracted from the cold object plus the work input equals to the heat rejected. So we can say QH equals to QC plus W. The heat rejected to the hot environment equals to heat extracted from the cold object plus the work that is required to keep running the refrigerator. Or we can say that the work done, the work that has to be input for this process to happen equals to the heat rejected to the hot surrounding minus the heat extracted from the already cold object. So QH minus QC. For the refrigerator, we define a quantity called coefficient of performance. If you are designing a refrigerator and you want this refrigerator to be super duper awesome, out of these three, which one you will like to be large? A super duper refrigerator has got which quantity large? So sir, a refrigerator will be super duper awesome when it can extract a lot of heat from the already cold object. It can extract a lot of heat from what is inside it. And this refrigerator will be called super duper if it consumes very less amount of electricity to do so. So a very less amount of work input has to be given. So coefficient of performance is nothing but the heat extracted from the cold object upon the work done. The higher the value of QC, the more awesome your refrigerator is. The lower the value of the work input, the electricity input, the more awesome your refrigerator is. So coefficient of performance of refrigerator is defined as the heat extracted from the cold upon the work input. Think of it again as output by input. If you are designing a refrigerator, what you are interested in? How much heat has been extracted from the thing which is already cold? And what is your input? So we have to give in electricity, output upon input kind of thing, right? So now coefficient of performance equals to QC by W. In place of work done, you can write QH minus QC. So we can write coefficient of performance to be equals to QC upon QH minus QC. Now beta, sometimes they will say a refrigerator is defined on the guidelines of a Carnot engine. When they say this, they want you to talk in terms of temperature rather than heat. So beta, in place of QC, write temperature of the cold object. In place of QH, write temperature of the hot object. So we can even write if a refrigerator is derived from Carnot engine, if it is made from Carnot engine, then we know that Q1 by Q2 equals to T1 by T2, no? Same thing. So here you will write TC upon TH minus TC will be your coefficient of performance. Now let's do a question based on refrigerator. So when the electricity of 100 watt means 100 joule per second is provided to a refrigerator, it rejects a heat of 300 joule per second to the surrounding. So when the energy input is 100 joule per second, it rejects a heat of 300 joule per second to the surrounding. Determine the coefficient of performance of this refrigerator. So what to do? Visualize. Here you have a refrigerator. The energy input per second is 100 joule and it rejects energy equals to 300 joule per second to the surrounding. So QH, the heat rejected, is 300. From energy conservation, if every second the energy supply from the electricity is 100 joule and it rejects 300 joule, then what has to be the value of QC? Sir, it has to be 200 joule. It must be extracting 200 joule of energy from the cold object. So what has to be the coefficient of performance? Sir, heat extracted from the cold 200 upon work input which is 100. So coefficient of performance will be 2. So from energy conservation, we can say that QH equals to QC plus W. QH is given, W is given. So you will say 300 equals to QC plus 100. So the heat extracted from the cold object comes out to be 200 joule. Coefficient of performance is heat extracted from the cold upon the work done upon the energy input. So that will be equals to 200 upon 100. That will give you 2. Now let's talk about second law of thermodynamics. There are two statements that you should know about the second law of thermodynamics. The first statement is called Kelvin-Planck statement. What does the Kelvin-Planck statement say? It says that you can't convert 100% of heat into equivalent amount of work. It means that you can't have an heat engine in which if you supply some heat Q1, you get 100% of work and no heat is rejected to sink. You can't have a heat engine of 100% efficiency. Some amount of heat must be rejected to the sink so that the work done is always less than the heat given. So the Kelvin-Planck statement tells us that you can't convert 100% of heat into equivalent amount of work. Some heat must be rejected to the sink. The second statement is called Clausius statement. It says that net heat transfer can't take place from colder object to hotter object without any other change. When we design a refrigerator, what does the refrigerator do? So it takes heat from the cold and it gives heat to the hot, releases to the hotter surrounding. Now the Clausius statement tells us that you can't have a refrigerator working such that it continuously keep on taking heat from the colder source and keep on discarding it to the hotter source without the input of any work. This is not possible. The net heat can't flow from colder object to hotter object on its own. So these are the two statements on the second law of thermodynamics. That's all, and with this we conclude our heat part. In the next class we will talk about the next leg of physics, where we will talk about some mechanical property of solid, fluid, SHM and waves. See you guys in the next hour. Bye bye. So that's all for now. See you guys in the next hour.